The galaxy was full of strange worlds, powerful empires, and endless trade routes. On one dusty space station near the edge of known space, a large auction market was preparing to close for the night. Hundreds of buyers had already left with rare creatures, expensive workers, and valuable treasures. The bright lights of the market slowly dimmed as traders counted their profits. Most of the cages were empty now. Only a few unwanted beings remained behind, waiting for a fate nobody cared about. In the darkest corner of the market stood a small metal cage that most visitors never bothered to approach. Inside were two young alien girls. They sat quietly together, trying to stay warm in the cold night air. One girl had long silver hair and soft blue skin. Her large violet eyes showed fear and sadness. The other girl had shorter dark hair and bright green eyes. She looked tougher, always watching everyone around her with suspicion. Both girls looked tired, hungry, and completely alone. The traders hated keeping them there. For 3 days the girls had been displayed in the auction hall. Hundreds of buyers had seen them, yet nobody wanted them. Some buyers said they looked weak. Others claimed they were too wild and difficult to control. Rumors spread through the station that the sisters brought bad luck wherever they went. Whether the rumors were true or not, they were enough to scare away customers. Every time someone approached the cage, they quickly walked away again. A large alien trader named Varn stood nearby, looking frustrated. His thick gray skin was covered with sweat as he checked his sales records. He had sold every other creature in his collection except the two girls. Each day they remained unsold cost him money. He glared at the cage and shook his head. To him, they were not children. They were simply a problem that refused to disappear. He wanted them gone before the station closed for good. One of the girls quietly looked up at him. Her name was Lyra. She was the older sister by only 1 year. Despite her fear, she still tried to stay calm for her younger sister. Next to her sat Nira, who folded her arms tightly across her chest. Nira trusted nobody. Every cruel word, every angry face, and every broken promise had taught her one lesson. The galaxy did not care about girls like them. She believed trusting people only led to pain. As the evening continued, another group of buyers walked past the cage. One wealthy merchant stopped for a moment and examined the sisters. His eyes moved over them carefully. For a brief second, Lyra felt hope. Maybe this person would finally give them a home. Maybe their nightmare would end. But the merchant laughed and shook his head. He called them worthless and continued walking. The small hope inside Lyra disappeared once again. Several hours later, the market became nearly empty. Workers packed equipment into containers. Cargo ships prepared for departure. The station manager announced that the auction would officially end at midnight. Varn cursed under his breath. If the girls remained unsold, he planned to abandon them on a remote mining world. Nobody survived long there without protection. He did not care what happened afterward. As far as he was concerned, they had already become useless. While checking inventory, Varn activated a small scanner. He intended to scan the cage for tracking records before closing. The machine suddenly flashed bright red. A warning sound echoed through the room. Strange numbers appeared across the screen. Varn froze instantly. His eyes widened with shock. He quickly looked around to make sure nobody was watching. Then he turned off the scanner and hid it inside his coat. For several seconds, he simply stood there staring at the girls. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Something about that reading had terrified him. The scanner had detected an energy signature that should not exist anymore. It belonged to a bloodline believed extinct for hundreds of years. Varn had heard stories about it as a child. Ancient rulers, lost worlds, powerful secrets. The reading made no sense, yet the machine had clearly shown it. Lyra noticed the fear in his eyes. She had never seen him look frightened before. Normally, he acted cruel and confident. Now he looked nervous. She wanted to ask what was wrong, but remained silent. Nira noticed it too. The younger sister quietly moved closer to Lyra. Neither of them understood what had happened, but both knew something strange was going on. The air around them suddenly felt heavier. At that same moment, a small transport ship landed outside the station. A human mechanic stepped down carrying a worn tool bag over his shoulder. His name was Ethan Carter. He was not rich, powerful, or famous. He spent most of his days repairing mining equipment on distant colonies. His clothes were dusty, and his boots showed years of hard work. He had only come to the station to buy spare parts before returning home. Ethan walked through the nearly empty market looking at the closing stalls. Most traders ignored him because he clearly was not a wealthy customer. That suited him perfectly. He preferred quiet places and simple work. After purchasing the parts he needed, he started heading back toward his ship. Then he heard something. It was not a shout or a cry. It was the soft sound of someone trying not to cry. His footsteps slowed. He turned his head toward the dark corner of the market. There, hidden behind stacks of cargo containers, he saw the small metal cage. Inside sat two frightened alien girls. Their clothes were old and worn. Their faces showed exhaustion. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. The entire market was closing, yet nobody seemed to care that two children were being left behind. Then Lyra slowly lifted her eyes and looked directly at him. For the first time in days, someone was looking at them not with greed, fear, or disgust. The humans simply looked concerned, and for reasons neither of them understood, that single look felt different from everything they had experienced before. The next decision Ethan made would change all three of their lives forever. Ethan remained standing in front of the cage while the market slowly emptied around him. Most of the lights had already been turned off, leaving only a few dim lamps glowing across the large auction hall. Workers carried boxes toward cargo ships, and traders counted their final earnings before leaving. In the middle of all that activity, two alien girls sat quietly behind cold metal bars. Nobody seemed to care what happened to them. To everyone else, they were simply another failed sale. Inside the cage, Lyra and Nira watched the human carefully. They had seen many people stop and look at them over the past few days. Some laughed at them, some insulted them. Others acted as if they were invisible. This human felt different, but neither girl wanted to believe it. Hope had disappointed them too many times before. Lyra tried to stay calm while Nira kept her eyes fixed on Ethan, ready for him to leave like everyone else. Ethan looked at the sisters for several moments before turning toward the trader. Something about the situation bothered him deeply. The girls looked frightened, tired, and hungry. They were clearly children, yet they were being treated like unwanted objects. He had traveled across many systems as a mechanic and had seen difficult things before, but this felt especially wrong. He could not understand how an entire market full of people had simply ignored them. Varn quickly noticed Ethan's interest and hurried over. The large trader forced a smile onto his face, though nervousness still showed in his eyes. For days he had been trying to get rid of the girls. Every buyer had rejected them. Now a human was actually paying attention, and Varn did not want to lose this opportunity. The faster the sisters disappeared, the safer he would feel. The scanner's strange reading was still fresh in his mind. "These girls are cheap," Varn said with a laugh. "You will not find a lower price anywhere. Take them both and save yourself some money." His voice sounded cheerful, but Ethan immediately noticed something strange. Most traders tried to increase prices and praise their products. Varn was doing the opposite. He seemed desperate for the sale to happen as quickly as possible. That made Ethan even more suspicious. Instead of discussing money, Ethan began asking questions. He wanted to know where the girls came from and why nobody wanted them. Varn repeated the same stories he had told everyone else. He claimed they were difficult to manage, unlucky, and more trouble than they were worth. However, every answer sounded rehearsed. Ethan noticed the trader avoiding direct eye contact whenever he spoke. The entire explanation felt incomplete, as if important details were being hidden. While the conversation continued, Lyra listened carefully from inside the cage. She was surprised that Ethan kept asking about them instead of immediately discussing a price. Nobody had ever shown interest in their lives before. Most buyers only cared about usefulness and appearance. For the first time in a long while, someone seemed curious about who they were. That small detail caught her attention. Even Nira looked slightly confused by the human's behavior. The station clock displayed only 15 minutes until midnight. Around the auction hall, workers began shutting down the final sections of the market. Ethan folded his arms and asked one final question. He wanted to know exactly what would happen if the girls remained unsold. The answer came after a brief moment of silence. Varn shrugged and casually explained that they would be transported to a remote mining world scheduled for abandonment next month. The words instantly drained the color from Lyra's face. She had heard stories about those places. Old mining colonies often lacked food, medicine, and security. People abandoned there rarely survived for long. Beside her, Nira looked away and clenched her fists tightly. Deep down, both sisters had feared this outcome for days. Hearing it spoken aloud made the danger feel real. Their future suddenly looked darker than ever. Ethan stared at the traitor in disbelief. He looked back at the girls and imagined them alone on a dying world with no help and no protection. The thought made his stomach twist. He remembered difficult years from his own childhood and how a few kind people had helped him survive. If those people had ignored him, his life might have ended very differently. Standing there now, he realized he had a choice to make. Varn sensed hesitation and quickly displayed the price. The number appeared on Ethan's wrist device. It was lower than expected, but still expensive enough to hurt. Buying the girls would consume nearly all of his savings. Years of hard work would disappear in a single payment. He had planned to use that money for ship repairs and future emergencies. Spending it now would create serious problems for him later. For a few long moments, Ethan remained silent. The market seemed strangely quiet as he stared at the glowing number. Logic told him to walk away. The girls were strangers. Their problems were not his responsibility. Nobody would blame him for leaving. Yet every time he looked toward the cage, he saw fear in their eyes. They were not asking for riches or comfort. They were simply hoping for a chance to live. Lyra watched him carefully and tried not to expect anything. She had learned that hope could be painful when it disappeared. Nira had already convinced herself that the human would leave. That was what everyone else had done. It was easier to believe in disappointment than risk believing in kindness. The sisters sat silently together, waiting for the final answer that would decide their future. Then Ethan slowly raised his wrist device and approved the transfer. The payment completed within seconds. Varn's eyes widened in shock before excitement quickly replaced it. Nearby workers laughed and exchanged confused looks. Some thought the human had lost his mind. Others joked that only a fool would spend so much money on two unwanted girls. Ethan ignored every comment and focused only on the cage. A loud click echoed through the auction hall as the electronic lock released. The cage door slowly slid open for the first time in years. Lyra and Nira stared at the opening without moving. Freedom stood only a few steps away, yet it felt impossible to believe. Their entire lives had taught them that good things never lasted. Even now they expected someone to stop them, or tell them it was a mistake. As the sisters hesitated near the open door, a hooded figure watched from the shadows on the far side of the market. The stranger quietly activated a hidden communicator and spoke a few short words. Moments later, a cold voice answered from the other side. Several ships waiting outside the station immediately received new orders. Neither Ethan nor the girls noticed the silent exchange, but powerful eyes were now following their every move, and the danger ahead was far greater than any of them could imagine. The cold night air greeted Ethan, Lyra, and Nira as they left the auction station together. Large cargo ships filled the sky above the landing platforms, their engines glowing like distant stars. Workers rushed between loading areas while security drones floated overhead. For Ethan, it felt like an ordinary night at a busy trade station. For Lyra and Nira, it felt completely different. It was the first time in years that they were walking without chains, cages, or guards watching every step. Even though they were free, neither girl walked close to Ethan. They stayed several steps behind him, exchanging nervous glances whenever he looked their way. Lyra wanted to believe he was different from the people they had met before, but trust did not come easily. Nira trusted him even less. In her experience, kindness usually came with hidden conditions. She watched every movement he made, waiting for him to reveal his true intentions. Ethan noticed their distance but did not force a conversation. He understood that trust took time. Instead, he led them toward a small food stall near the docking area. The owner was cleaning tables and preparing to close for the night. Ethan ordered 3 hot meals and sat down. When the food arrived, Lyra and Nira simply stared at it. The smell alone made their stomachs ache with hunger, but neither girl touched the plates. For a moment, Ethan thought something was wrong. Then he realized they were waiting for permission. The thought hit him harder than he expected. These girls had spent so long being treated like property that they no longer believed food belonged to them. Ethan gently pushed the plates closer. He told them they did not need permission anymore. The words were simple, but they carried a meaning the sisters had almost forgotten. Lyra slowly picked up a piece of bread. Nira hesitated only a second longer before grabbing her meal. Within moments, both girls were eating faster than Ethan had ever seen. They were not being rude. They were starving. Every bite disappeared almost immediately. Ethan quietly looked away and pretended not to notice. He did not want them to feel embarrassed. The sight only confirmed how badly they had been treated. After finishing the meal, Ethan guided them toward Docking Bay 27, where his small transport ship waited. It was not a fancy vessel. The paint was scratched, several panels showed signs of repair, and the cargo section was filled with tools and spare parts. Compared to the luxury ships around it, Ethan's vessel looked ordinary, yet to Lyra and Nira, it looked safer than any place they had seen in years. As they approached the ship, neither Ethan nor the girls noticed three figures watching from the shadows. The hooded stranger from the auction market had not been alone. Several bounty hunters had already received instructions to follow the sisters. Hidden scanners tracked their movements across the station. Whoever wanted the girls found was willing to spend a great deal of money. The hunters did not yet know why the sisters were important, but they intended to find out. Inside the ship, Ethan showed the girls a small living area with 2 empty sleeping cabins. He explained that they could use the rooms however they wanted. Lyra looked around in surprise. Nobody had ever offered her a room before. Nira immediately searched every corner for hidden locks and restraints. When she found none, confusion appeared on her face. The ship felt more like a home than a prison, and that made her suspicious. Several hours later, the ship finally departed the station. Bright stars stretched into lines as the vessel entered faster than light travel. Ethan remained in the cockpit, while the sisters rested nearby. The journey should have been peaceful. Instead, warning alarms suddenly exploded across the control panels. Red lights flashed throughout the cockpit. Ethan immediately sat upright and checked the sensors. 3 unidentified ships had appeared directly behind them. The mechanic's expression darkened as the readings became clearer. The unknown vessels were moving fast and matching his course exactly. That was no coincidence. Someone was following them. Ethan quickly adjusted the engines and changed direction. For a few minutes, the maneuver seemed successful. Then the ships copied the exact same movement. Whoever was behind them clearly had advanced tracking equipment. Lyra and Nira entered the cockpit as the alarms continued. Fear immediately appeared in their eyes. Trouble had followed them their entire lives, and this situation felt familiar. Ethan tried to stay calm while studying the sensor data. He had no weapons powerful enough for a serious battle. His ship was designed for cargo transport and repairs, not combat. If the pursuers attacked, escape would be his only option. Suddenly, a bright energy blast shot past the ship's left side. The entire vessel shook violently. Nira nearly lost her balance while Lyra grabbed a nearby railing. Another blast followed seconds later. This one struck the rear shields directly. Sparks flew from several control panels as warning messages filled the cockpit. The hunters were no longer hiding. They had decided to attack. As Ethan worked desperately to keep the ship stable, something strange happened. A small crystal pendant hanging around Lyra's neck suddenly began glowing with soft silver light. She looked down in shock. The pendant had never done that before. The glow grew brighter with every passing second. At the same time, the ship's damaged shields unexpectedly started repairing themselves. Even Ethan noticed the impossible readings appearing on his monitors. Before anyone could understand what was happening, a wave of silver energy spread through the entire vessel. The damaged systems instantly stabilized. Warning alarms disappeared. Power levels jumped far beyond normal limits. Ethan stared at the controls in complete disbelief. Nothing about the situation made sense. Meanwhile, Lyra looked at the glowing pendant with fear. She had worn it her entire life, yet she had no idea what it truly was. Far behind them, Inside one of the pursuing ships, the bounty hunters detected the energy burst. Their leader's face immediately turned pale. He quickly transmitted an urgent message to an unknown contact. The response arrived only seconds later. When he read the message, fear replaced every trace of confidence. For the first time since beginning the mission, he realized the girls were far more important than anyone had told him. While the stars rushed past outside the ship, Ethan looked from the glowing pendant to the frightened sisters. Questions filled his mind. Who were these girls, really? Why were armed hunters chasing them across space? And how had Lyra just activated technology that seemed impossible? The answers remained hidden, but one thing was becoming clear. The two girls he had rescued from an auction were carrying a secret powerful enough to make people kill for it. The silver light from Lyra's pendant slowly faded, but the questions it created remained. Inside the cockpit, Ethan continued staring at the ship's monitors. According to every system on board, the damaged shields had repaired themselves in seconds. That should have been impossible. Even advanced military ships could not recover that quickly. Yet somehow, the moment the pendant began glowing, the ship's systems returned to normal. Ethan had spent most of his life repairing machines, and he knew this was not an ordinary malfunction. Lyra sat quietly in her chair, holding the pendant tightly in her hand. Her heart was still racing. She had worn the crystal around her neck since childhood. It was the only thing she still possessed from her parents. She remembered her mother telling her never to lose it, but she had never explained why. Until now, it had always looked like a simple piece of jewelry. Seeing it release that strange energy frightened her almost as much as it amazed her. Nira remained close to her sister, watching everything with concern. She did not understand what had happened, but she knew it was connected to their past. For years, they had lived without answers. Their parents had disappeared when they were very young. After that, they were moved between traders, smugglers, and criminals who only saw them as property. Nobody ever spoke about where they came from. Nobody ever explained why certain people seemed unusually interested in them. Ethan finally broke the silence and asked the question both sisters feared. He wanted to know the truth about their family. Lyra lowered her eyes and admitted that she knew very little. Most of her memories came from a small house on a distant world she could barely remember. She remembered her mother's voice, her father's smile, and the crystal pendant. Everything else had become a blur after years of hardship and fear. Before the conversation could continue, a signal suddenly appeared on the main communication screen. An incoming transmission request flashed across the cockpit. Ethan frowned immediately. Very few people knew his current location. The timing felt suspicious. After a moment of hesitation, he accepted the signal. The screen flickered to life, revealing the image of an elderly alien male with white hair and deep golden eyes. The stranger looked shocked the moment he saw Lyra and Nira. His expression changed from confusion to disbelief. For several seconds, he simply stared at them, without speaking. Then he slowly stood from his chair. His hands were trembling. Tears appeared in his eyes as if he were looking at someone he had not seen in many years. Neither sister recognized him, but the old alien clearly recognized them. "My stars," the stranger whispered. "They are alive." The elderly alien introduced himself as Kale. He claimed to be a historian and former advisor from a civilization that no longer existed. Ethan remained cautious, but Kale's reaction felt genuine. The old man explained that he had detected the unusual energy burst from Lyra's pendant. According to him, only one bloodline in the galaxy could produce that specific energy signature. Hearing those words made the room feel suddenly smaller. Kale carefully explained that centuries earlier, a powerful empire known as the Aurelian Dominion had ruled thousands of star systems. The empire had been respected across the galaxy for its wisdom and advanced technology. However, a great war eventually destroyed it. The royal family disappeared, and most people believed the bloodline had become extinct. Over time, the empire became little more than a legend told in history books. As Kyle spoke, he displayed old records on the screen. Ancient portraits appeared one after another. Lyra's eyes widened immediately. The people in the images looked remarkably familiar. Their facial features, eye color, and silver markings closely matched her own appearance. Nira noticed the similarity as well. The more images they saw, the harder it became to dismiss the possibility. Somehow, they looked connected to the lost rulers of the ancient empire. Kale then revealed the truth that changed everything. According to surviving records, Lyra and Nira were not ordinary girls. They were direct descendants of the final royal family of the Aurelian Dominion. Their bloodline carried genetic codes linked to ancient technologies hidden throughout the galaxy. Whoever controlled those technologies could gain enormous influence and power. Suddenly, the attacks and pursuit began making sense. The sisters sat frozen with shock. Their entire lives had been filled with poverty, fear, and rejection. Now they were being told they belonged to one of the most important bloodlines in galactic history. Nira immediately rejected the idea. She insisted there had to be a mistake. People like them did not become princesses. People like them ended up forgotten in cages. Yet even she could not ignore the evidence appearing before her eyes. Kale's expression became serious. He warned Ethan that the situation was far more dangerous than they realized. News of the energy burst had already started spreading through secret networks. Powerful organizations would soon learn that the royal bloodline still existed. Some groups would want to control the sisters. Others would want them eliminated before they could become symbols of hope. Either way, remaining hidden would become increasingly difficult. As if to prove his point, a breaking galactic news report suddenly appeared on the communication screen. The broadcast showed a digital wanted notice spreading rapidly across multiple star systems. At the center of the image were the faces of Lyra and Nira. Beneath the pictures was a reward so enormous that Ethan could hardly believe the number. It was enough money to buy entire planets. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the screen. Somewhere across the galaxy, thousands of hunters, mercenaries, and criminals were already seeing the same broadcast. Many would begin searching immediately. The sisters were no longer invisible. They were no longer forgotten. For the first time in their lives, the entire galaxy knew they existed. Ethan looked at the frightened girls sitting beside him. Just a day earlier, nobody wanted them. Now countless people would chase them across the stars. The danger surrounding them had grown beyond anything he imagined. Yet as he watched Lyra and Nira struggle to process the truth, he realized one thing. No matter how complicated things became, he could not abandon them now. Unfortunately, the galaxy had already decided to make that choice much harder. Far away in deep space aboard a massive black warship, a mysterious figure watched the wanted notice appear on a giant holographic screen. A slow smile spread across the figure's face. After years of searching, the final heirs had finally revealed themselves. The hunt was no longer beginning. The hunt had found its target. The days following the broadcast were some of the most stressful Ethan had ever experienced. Everywhere they traveled, the faces of Lyra and Nira appeared on public screens, communication networks, and security databases. Their names spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. What had once been a secret hidden in a forgotten auction market was now known by millions. Every bounty hunter, mercenary, and criminal looking for a fortune suddenly had the same target. Ethan knew remaining on major trade routes would be dangerous. Too many people were watching, too many eyes were searching. After studying old star charts, he selected a remote colony hidden near the edge of explored space. The settlement was small, isolated, and largely ignored by the rest of the galaxy. Few ships visited the area, and even fewer stayed long. If there was any place where the sisters could disappear for a while, this was it. When their ship landed, Lyra and Nira stepped outside and looked around in surprise. The colony was simple but peaceful. Small farms covered the nearby fields, while modest homes stretched across rolling hills beneath a bright blue sky. Children played near a river without fear, and families worked together in the open sunlight. There were no cages, no guards, and no auction platforms. For the first time in years, the sisters found themselves somewhere that felt normal. The colony leader welcomed Ethan warmly. He had repaired equipment there several times in the past, and many residents already knew him. Nobody asked questions about the girls. Nobody stared at them with suspicion. Instead, people simply treated them like visitors. The kindness felt strange to Lyra and almost unbelievable to Nira. They had become so used to distrust that ordinary friendliness felt unfamiliar. Over the following weeks, life slowly settled into a routine. Ethan rented a small house near the edge of the colony, where all three could stay together. Every morning, he worked on farming machines and transport vehicles, while the sisters helped with simple tasks around the settlement. At first, they struggled to adapt. Years of fear and uncertainty had left deep scars. They constantly expected something bad to happen. Little by little, however, the colony began changing them. Lyra spent time helping local families and discovered she enjoyed caring for others. Children quickly became attached to her gentle nature. Nira preferred spending time outdoors, exploring forests, and learning practical survival skills. Though she still distrusted strangers, she gradually became less defensive. The constant fear that had followed her for years slowly began losing its grip. One evening, Ethan decided to teach the sisters how to repair machinery. He believed practical skills were important no matter where life led them. The lesson started with a broken farm drone that refused to start. At first, neither girl showed much confidence. They assumed they would fail. Ethan patiently guided them through every step, explaining each part in simple terms. Before long, the drone's engine came back to life. The success filled both sisters with excitement. For perhaps the first time, someone was teaching them because he believed they could learn, not because he wanted something from them. Ethan celebrated their achievement with genuine pride. The smile on Lyra's face grew brighter than he had ever seen. Even Nira laughed when the repaired drone accidentally sprayed water across Ethan's clothes. The sound surprised all three of them. As the months passed, a bond began forming that none of them expected. Ethan stopped feeling like a rescuer and started feeling like family. He helped the girls with their fears, listened to their worries, and encouraged their dreams. In return, the sisters brought warmth and life into the quiet home. The empty house that had once felt lonely now felt alive with conversation, laughter, and shared meals. One night during dinner, a small moment changed everything. Ethan had spent the entire day repairing damaged irrigation systems after a storm. He returned home exhausted and covered in dirt. When he entered the kitchen, he found Lyra and Nira waiting with a meal they had prepared themselves. It was simple food, but they had worked hard on it. For several seconds, Ethan simply stood there speechless. The sisters exchanged nervous glances before Lyra finally spoke. She thanked Ethan for everything he had done since the day he opened their cage. Nira usually avoided emotional conversations, but even she admitted that their lives would have ended long ago without him. Ethan smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. He had never considered himself a hero. He had simply done what felt right. For the first time, the girls openly talked about their future. Instead of discussing survival, they discussed dreams. Lyra wanted to help people across the galaxy one day. Nira wanted to explore worlds she had only read about. Their hopes sounded normal, but that was exactly what made them special. After years of living in fear, they were finally imagining a future worth looking forward to. Unfortunately, peace rarely lasts forever. Unknown to the colony, danger had been moving closer with every passing week. The enormous bounty on the sisters continued attracting attention. Most hunters failed to find useful information, but not all of them. One individual had managed to get much closer than anyone realized. He had spent weeks living among the colonists, pretending to be an ordinary trader. Late one evening, that hidden spy sat alone inside a communication outpost on the edge of the settlement. A secure transmission connected him to a distant warship. Calmly, he reported everything he had learned. He described the girls, their location, and the routines they followed each day. The information was transmitted directly to powerful people who had been searching for months. Far above the colony, hidden beyond sensor range, several enormous ships emerged silently from hyperspace. Their dark hulls blocked the stars as they formed a loose orbit around the planet. Weapon systems activated across their surfaces while landing craft prepared for deployment. The invasion fleet had finally arrived, and it was larger than anything the small colony could possibly defend against. Back on the surface, Ethan, Lyra, and Nira sat together enjoying one of the happiest evenings of their lives. None of them noticed the growing shadows in orbit. None of them knew that thousands of armed soldiers were preparing for descent. The peaceful life they had built together was about to face its greatest test, and by sunrise everything would change.